Hi, my name is Chris, and this video is called The Journey of Distraction. The question I want to address is, what is distraction from a spiritual perspective? I mean, you're inside your own mind, after all, and what you do with it is entirely your business. There's no guilt in reality, so whatever you do with your mind is okay, but in the physical world, your actions can have consequences that can produce more guilt. Your only solution is not just to do as you please, but to return to guiltlessness as a state of identity. Distraction is what leads you away from that identity and back into guilt. Now, I use visualization as my personal technique to try to achieve a guiltless identity. I see through my guiltless identity's eyes and then see myself literally as being him. My guiltless identity dwells in a guiltless state of being. His environment is idealized, and he sees things without any interference from guilt. He doesn't get angry or want revenge, get depressed or anxious, or waste time in confusion. He knows what to do and when to do it. It's much easier and more comfortable to live as him than as my guilt-based identity. Initially, I had to discover the idea of a guiltless identity, to figure out that it even existed. Then I had to imagine my guiltless identity and observe him. Then I had to extend my identification so that I was seeing through his eyes and asking him questions while he answered them, which gave me an increased vantage point into his answers, which helped me over time to understand where he was coming from and how he was thinking. This was the way in which I became familiarized with the guiltless way of thinking as a system of thought. I worked on this for years until I came to see him as part of myself, as an extension of my own identity rather than another person that was alien from me. Then I tried to deepen my identification with him even further so that I could attempt to live in the day-to-day world as him rather than just experiencing being him as a temporary state of consciousness when I was meditating. This meant finding deeper and deeper degrees of surrender into his state of consciousness until I could just be him. Now I can be him and function in the world for extended periods of time, but I still struggle a bit with the issue of identification occasionally. But also along this extended journey, I've observed that behind the scenes that our mind is constantly wandering between guilt and guiltlessness. What I mean is that the mind is traveling between these two poles without our really being aware of it, and this circuit is something that we're navigating as we try to get to our guiltless identity. But even a person who isn't working on that is still on a daily basis having highs and lows, moving towards guilt and then towards guiltlessness, depending on where they are at mentally. Sometimes you're happy, peaceful, feeling good. Other times you feel like you're in hell, you're angry, depressed, ashamed, nervous, whatever. Guiltless identity shows you who you are in reality. It does this by taking you all the way to the end of the guiltlessness polarity and informing you about it. I say that it's who you really are because guiltlessness removes confusion, and guilt is entirely based upon confusion. Without confusion and the need for attack and defense, your mind is able to relax and spread out and simply be itself for the first time. In your whole life, you've spent your entire life reacting to problems and obstacles and pain and conflict, and you never get a chance really to be yourself because everything you do is an adaptation to a hostile environment. Guiltlessness is a non-hostile environment. It's a mental environment, and it shows you how to be yourself, simply. So guiltless identity shows us who we are. All guiltless identity journeys that people make, going from guilt to guiltlessness, no matter what approach they use, are a long drawn out decision about who you want to be as a person. In other words, getting from your guilt identity to your guiltless identity is all about making the single decision about who you want to be. And it takes a long time to make that decision because your identity is deeply entrenched in guilt. Guiltlessness has always been within us. It's never left us. But we've been deeply distracted by guilt and drawn back into it over and over again. Guilt really defines who we are inside the illusion of physicality, more often than it doesn't. So we have to map our journey of distraction and figure out how to get back home, back to who we really are, to our guiltless identity. Guilt, as I've just said, is very much about distraction, and distraction means not necessarily knowing what we want, but knowing that we want to search for something that's missing from our experience. We're suffering, so we go on this hunt, this search for something to alleviate our pain temporarily and distract us from the nature of our experience. This approach works okay occasionally, but what it really does is reinforce our sense that we're trapped, and it deepens our despair over the long term. Because we realize we're always on the run. Guiltless identity is the only healing alternative to our state of perpetual pain. We're on the run all the time, and those few times that we're not, we're scared or angry or hurting. Those times, the good times, give us the illusion that our life is great when in fact it isn't. And this is how guilt draws out our experience by giving us just enough hope, enough positivity to go on living while still being in pain almost all the time. So if we're to retain real quality of life, we need to wake up to the fact that the lie isn't working. Guilt doesn't work. But guilt itself, the source of all our suffering, is the biggest lie in existence. It's the king of all lies, and it spins webs of confusion and illusion, but only for self-serving purposes. Guilt is the opposite of love, or at least as close to the opposite of love as our mind can imagine. As love's opposite, it attempts to do everything that it can for the sake of harming us, to extend our pain, and then only really for the joy it'll take in murdering us. It attempts to replace love with murder. So why would we want to live under a king like that? Guilt as a state of identity operates on distraction. But the things that distract us not only don't solve our problems, but also cause us suffering as well. So in the end, our life is a series of events that attempt to drag out our suffering before we're murdered by the force that's trapped us in suffering in the first place. Guilt is filled with hatred for us, and its only dream is our eventual death. We wouldn't have a relationship with somebody who only enjoyed hurting us, was only nice to us to keep us around a little bit longer so it could hurt us tomorrow or the next day, and whose ultimate goal was to strangle us to death. In the same way, we shouldn't have any relationship with guilt, because guilt is very much that person, only at an abstract level, creating, like some sort of evil god, the suffering that's going on inside our mind. People say that suffering serves a spiritual purpose, and that therefore suffering is spiritual. But I would have to say no, because nothing in reality has anything to do with suffering. There's no suffering in reality. Suffering is entirely a product of guilt. The spiritual world is real, and it's already established. It's where we came from. And pain has no place in it. Guilt, on the other hand, is a lie, and is the only source of pain in existence. All suffering that we go through helps us in the sense of causing us to evolve to the day when we'll be free from guilt. But that doesn't mean that suffering in and of itself is meaningful or good. Suffering is ultimately under the larger umbrella of guilt, and therefore is worthless. Realizing that it's worthless is really the point of taking the journey. The only way this can end is with us realizing that guilt has no value whatsoever and losing interest in it completely. People turn their backs on hobbies every day. They give up boat building and puzzle making and wood carving and all sorts of things that they take up because they lose interest and they walk away. That's all it is, ultimately, is losing interest in guilt. And we do this by realizing that we don't enjoy it and there's nothing in it that we want. Although our conscious minds seem to wander back and forth between guilt and guiltlessness, our entire mind is actually one single aware thing. Nothing that happens to us is accidental or unintentional. Our mind is manufacturing the entire fiction of physicality and is doing so willingly. Our conscious mind is just the part of our mind that our greater mind has cordoned off within itself for the purpose of creating the illusion of guilt. So in other words, guilt, once taken into our mind willingly, then separates us from ourselves so that we no longer identify with our true self, but with a sort of demi-mind, a lesser mind within our larger conscious mind. But our larger conscious mind is still there, manufacturing the entire fiction. After all, it's our greater mind, our larger mind, that is dreaming all this and is thinking about guilt. It's only through the process of our greater mind thinking about the nature of guilt that we see an illusory world at all. And part of the illusion is our own identity, which is limited in terms of what it knows and what it doesn't know. Ignorance is a major factor in guilt. Guilt keeps us ignorant. It keeps us barefoot and enslaved. And the physical world is really just a series of symbols that are there to evoke feelings in us as part of the thinking process that we're going through. The world as such is not a real thing. We see it, I see it, you see it, other people see it, but it's not really there. It's an illusion. There is no world to be in. The world is merely a mechanism for something that's going on internally, and a means to prop up the lie that the nature of reality is external rather than internal, materialistic rather than spiritual. As our conscious mind becomes increasingly identified with guiltlessness, it has a strong influence on our entire life experience for the better. You know, we still suffer, we still have problems, but our mind is subconsciously involved in guilt, which is why that happens. Even if our conscious mind is very much identified with our guiltless identity, our subconscious mind is still involved with guilt, so there is still some suffering. However, when we do identify with our guiltless mind, we suffer mentally and emotionally much less, and down the line also physically as well, because it changes the nature of our relationship with others, with the world, and improves our quality of life in tangible ways. If our mind was to stop imagining guilt, to stop thinking about guilt, the physical world would merely cease to exist for us, which seems impossible, but it isn't. Because the physical world is essentially a dream, a type of dream, and we could wake up from it. But for most people, they live and die entirely within the context of the illusion of guilt. For myself personally, the difference is day and night. You know, when I'm firmly established in my guiltless identity, I feel completely different than I do in my guilt identity. My anxiety is gone, my anger is gone, I feel less confused, I know what I need to do and when I need to do it. I don't sit around mulling over my choices or problems. I just sort of sense what I need to do. I don't waste time on fear and worry. Somehow the future doesn't rise up against me like a monster. I don't feel threatened by it, and I'm not constantly chewing over past pain and trauma and things that I regret. It relieves a tremendous amount of my suffering, and the longer I stay in it, the more invested I become in it mentally and emotionally, the better it feels. While most people are externally focused on material things, and living in a state of distraction, if you're the type of person who's kind of world weary and doesn't like life very much and doesn't see what's so great about it, then you need a healing solution for your suffering. If you're suffering, then you start to experience more readiness to receive some sort of answer. There's all sorts of teachings like the Course in Miracles, and they can point you in the right direction of guiltlessness. But all teachings, no matter what form and shape they come to you, are there. All these teachings that lead to guiltlessness are really there to ultimately stabilize you in a guiltless state of mind all the time, so that you can function at that level in a stable sort of way. Once you're established there, your guiltless identity will help you and also help everyone else. It'll help the entire world. A lot of this is going to be happening at an invisible level that you won't even be consciously aware of, but it is happening. You'll see healing in your contacts with other people. It's through dealing with and interacting with other people that you'll see the biggest change, surprisingly. Time and time again, I've seen it, going out, and I could completely ignore everyone, not make any attempt to be social, and people are friendly and wave to me and smile and just seem to come out of the woodwork. I see this change in the energy, and I've seen it so many times now that it feels normal now, and I realize it's a real thing, and it's a demonstration of the healing nature of guiltlessness. And I will do nothing to cause it. I won't even make eye contact, and people will rush to me and smile and start conversations and be friendly and be generous, and they're responding to something that's going on in my state of consciousness. Witnessing this healing, the healing of your relationship with everyone, is the nature of the miracle, and that it gives you faith. It gives you faith in what you're doing, and deepens, and that faith in turn deepens your ability to commit to it and to take it seriously and to identify with your guiltless identity and to take it to the next level. Only perfect peace and happiness are going to be a solution to our problems. Distractions draw us out into the world, but they leave us stranded in this sort of netherworld, this darkness, where we're very exposed to danger and threatened. Yes, it was fun getting there, but underneath that fun was a deep sense of anxiety and pain. And when we're abandoned and distraction no longer works, then we really suffer, because we have nothing. It tends to fail us when we need it the most. And when it fails, it becomes obvious to us that it's a trap. Running and escaping to nowhere doesn't solve our problem. We need an approach that involves healing and transformation. Only guiltlessness can cure us. Think of it this way, that if a person concocts some sort of life philosophy that's random and has to do with their strategy, which usually involves being better in their mind than other people, and snotty and stuck up, or in some way defensive or cold, or managing other people through trickery and manipulation. We've seen it all. We've all seen these strategies and met these people who simply manage us and treat us like objects, and are either friendly or unfriendly in a way that's kind of fake and artificial. It's not a real relationship because it's defensive. The person is managing you, and they're trying to put you in a box before you could even say word one. How is that a real way of living? How are you ever going to establish real relationships with people if your entire life philosophy is built around self-defense? You won't. Guiltlessness allows you to have real relationships with people, and in the process figure out who you really are. Because let's face it, when you're busy reacting to constant threats and violence and fear and danger and anxiety and frustration, you're not being yourself. You're merely a series of mechanistic responses to a threat. That's not you. And you don't get to meet other people if they react that way as well. The only way to get past that defensiveness, that artificiality, is to create in your mind the safe space in which other people can come to you, and if they're ready and if they're willing, to meet you there and to enjoy that space and to say, oh, healing is possible. Being real as a person and not defensive is possible. Maybe I was wrong. And that's how their spiritual journey begins. Just with small steps, but important small steps. Guiltlessness is a complete strategy for being. It requires no violence, and it doesn't ask us to deprive us of what we want. It removes anger and hate, but doesn't make us vulnerable because it affects our physical circumstances and how people react to us. It shows us what to do and when to do things. It isn't mechanical, and it doesn't destroy our enjoyment of life. It doesn't ask us to become an ascetic, to starve, and to put on a wool robe and live on the top of a mountain. It asks us to be natural and normal. Its only desire is for us to sacrifice what is harming us and destroying our happiness, which isn't a sacrifice at all. It's the loving, sane, stable, and well-grounded approach to being, and it's a positive and safe state of consciousness to live in. But you don't learn this from an article. You learn it from doing it, and you learn it from practice. Over time, you come to see that things like A Course in Miracles are not just talking about theory, but practice. That this is practical and ultimately doable. And furthermore, it translates into a real state of being that's desirable and better than where you're at. And therefore you begin to pursue it. And as you pursue it, it becomes more and more obvious to you that guilt is negative and harmful. And the distraction from what's spiritual into guilt is what's really the cause of all your problems, rather than a form of entertainment. How can something be entertainment if it's causing you not only to suffer, but to extend your overall suffering and lead you into darkness just to abandon you again and again and again? That's not entertainment. That's torture. It takes a lot to forgive people. We've been through a lot in our lives, a lot of hurts. And we sometimes feel like it's absolutely impossible to forgive some of the horrible things that have been done to us. And if there is one thing in our life that's happened to us, one traumatic, horrible thing that is so bad that we can't possibly forgive, then how meaningful is our forgiveness of everything else? Not very much. It means that forgiveness doesn't win, guilt wins. But that's not the case. When we're in a guiltless state of consciousness, we understand that other people don't possess free will. When we see that, rather than just conceiving of it as an intellectual idea, when we actually see the guiltlessness of others through seeing their absence of free will, we understand that no matter what's been done to us, it wasn't done out of free will. And therefore, it wasn't really evil, nor was it intentional. The person had to do it, just as we had to be the victim. So this was all, in a way, kind of mechanistic. It happened. But it wasn't an act of free will. And therefore, there was no evil. And therefore, there was, in a sense, nothing to forgive. Only in seeing that can we heal and forgive. Because only in that form does forgiveness mean absolute forgiveness forever for everything. So we can't allow distraction to run our lives. We have plenty of time to do what needs to be done, and by attaining a guiltless state of identity, we will see healing in our life that allows us more time to be able to process this journey from guilt to guiltlessness. Everything that happens, in a sense, is a kind of window dressing that is just a means to get us to our ultimate goal. We may be frustrated at times. We may feel like we're failing to become our new guiltless identity. And these are problems that we have to deal with along the way, but they're all aspects of our attachment to guilt. Guilt will express itself as a feeling of frustration, as a feeling of failure. But ultimately, we'll work through all that and understand that there's really nothing standing between us and success except letting go of guilt. being done with it. No matter what happens to distract us, we have to take it as a lesson and just move on. Distraction is only going to slow us down when we really need to be speeding up and escaping the illusion. Guilt is a shell game of distraction, illusion, and getting scammed out of everything that we want. Why would we waste our time playing a game against a criminal who's dead set on taking all our money? In the end, we are going to lose. Our only opportunity to escape this bad cycle is to live differently and to find peace of mind. We need to let it take us by the hand and escort us out of the war zone. The war zone of suffering and pain that comes from guilt. The world can't be saved because the world doesn't exist. It's merely a symptom of the disease of guilt in our mind. So rather than trying to save the world, let's focus on solving the fundamental problem of guilt in our consciousness that has taken us away from who we truly are and into a false world of conflict and pain. Thanks very much for listening. Take care.